I read Wings of Fire when I was 7, and while that was definitely a little bit too young for it, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't obsessed. Children are morbid as fuck. However, there is a difference between a child's emotional intelligence and understanding of pain, especially pain happening to another living being, and also a 19-year-old college dropout's perspective of that same pain. Join me as I jump back into the lovely world of childhood nostalgia and trauma that is Wings of Fire. I was obsessed with this series, and judging by its primarily adult and older teen fan base on YouTube and other sites, I just know there's something in it for someone other than the children it was meant to be for. That was a bad sentence, I'm keeping it in anyway. Wings of Fire was great. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. Book 1, The Dragonette Prophecy. I got The Dragonette Prophecy right over here, and this is the copy I've had since I was literally 8 years old. You can tell by how chewed up it is. I'm going to basically be reading this book to you and describing all of the wonderful f***ed up shit that happens in it. So, just imagine, my elementary school teacher read this book aloud to the class in 4th grade. So this is just basically, I want you to close your eyes and imagine you too are in 4th grade. The Dragonettes are coming to save the day. Clay has lived his whole life under the mountain. The Mudwing Dragonette knows that war is raging between the dragon tribes and the world outside, a war that he and 4 other dragonettes are destined to end, according to the mysterious prophecy they've been taught. The 5 chosen dragonettes were stolen from their homes while they were still in their eggs and hidden away for years, all to fulfill the prophecy. But not every dragonette wants a destiny, and when danger threatens one of their own, Clay and his friends may choose freedom over fate, leave the mountain, and set the dragon world on a course that no one could have predicted. Ooh. So there's various different dragon tribes in the book. They're in a little guide at the beginning, as well as there being a cute little map of their world, which is shaped like a dragon if you really squint at it. I just find that kind of cute. The prologue of the book basically starts with this dragon, this ice dragon. His name is Viter. I could not pronounce his name. It's spelled like this. I could not pronounce his name as a child. I always pronounced it Hiviviter or something like that. Basically, he's part of a dragon peace group, and they're trying to gather the eggs from different dragon tribes that are all part of this cool dragon prophecy to end this giant dragon war between the dragon queens of the sand dragons, or sand wings. This analysis isn't really catering towards an audience who hasn't read the books, but at the same time, I think people who didn't read Wings of Fire as children need to be discriminated against. The prologue is basically him on the brightest night, having stolen one of the eggs of the sky dragons. So Viter's winging his way through this big storm. He's got the skywing egg, the last egg of the prophecy. He thinks everything's gonna be okay. Enter Burn, one of the Sandwing queens. Or queens-to-be. One of the soldiers grabbed a chain from the pile of smoldering coals. He threw it around the ice dragon's snout, clamping his jaws together with a sizzling smell of burning scales. Viter let out a muffled scream. Burn catches him, and they kind of torture him for like 3 pages. Now, okay, you might be thinking, hey, that isn't that violent. Are you just going to be going through this book, reading out every single vanilla scene of violence? Like, that's so boring. This isn't violent. But I need to just specify one specific thing that is violent. This dragon literally had his jaws wired shut with burning hot chains. And he's like as intelligent as a person. Could you imagine what it would feel like if a person had— That's just what braces are like. Well, we're very, very desensitized in this modern day, for has-been hotels and skibbity toilets and all of the weird stuff on Instagram Reels. I need to just say, despite all of that, this is still very, very violent. Nothing can change that. So Burn basically tortures him for a little while longer. And then she has this little monologue where she's like, "Tell me," Burn said, "what becomes of your precious prophecy if one of those 5 dragonettes is never hatched at all?" Burn really said that abortion's okay in any term. "You wouldn't," he said. "No one would harm a dragon egg." With an exaggerated lunge, Byrne pretended the wet egg was slipping from her talons, and then she let it fall over the side of the cliff into the rocky darkness below. That's a dead baby. And after doing that, she quickly disposes of the adamantly pro-life feeder. She rips through his wings. He screams in agony, and then she takes her, like, poison scorpion tail and stabs it through his skull. Just totally crushes it. Do you know how hard it is to crush a skull? She wanted it to go in smoothly. She probably stuck her barbed tail somewhere around, like, the nape of the neck. You know, the eye, the temple, one of the weaker spots. It was just this horrible description. That was a prologue, so they didn't have page numbers. We cut forward 6 years, which in dragon years is like, I guess 15 years? I don't really know, but the characters mostly act like young to mid-age teenagers, so for sake of clarity, I'm just gonna say they're 15, 16. Yeah, 16's a good number. They can drive. So we cut forward 6 years to the 5 other dragons from the prophecy, the ones that didn't get thrown off the side of a mountain. And that's where we meet our protagonist, Clay. This guy. He's my favorite character, not only because we have the same hair color. Clay is currently being physically abused by one of his other guardians. So, okay, the Talons of Peace have set up these prophecy dragonettes in this awful little underground quarantine zone. It's in a mountain, and there are 3 caretakers. I'm using that word loosely. There's 3 caretakers. There's Kestrel, who would be charged with neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, just generally being a bit of an ass. There's Webbs, who's the poster child of just, you know, the beaten wife who watches the dad belt the kids without, like, doing anything, like, just goes back to doing the dishes because he doesn't think he can do anything, so he's just completely learned helplessness and entirely normalized to cruelty. And then there's Dune, who's just hyping Kestrel up. He has like 5 lines. I don't know what to make of him. He has his own little prologue book where he doesn't act like someone who would excuse this level of abuse. So a lot of shit changed. And the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on the fact that these kids were abused, let me just read some of it, okay? Kestrel is currently doing some battle training with Clay. So she's this big, scary red dragon, and Clay is this little dinosaur-like brown dragon. Kestrel lunged for him again. Feint to the left, roll to the right, use your fire! Clay tried to duck under her wing to attack her from below, but of course he rolled the wrong way. One of her talons smashed him to the ground, and he yelped with pain. Which left was that, useless? Kestrel bellowed in his ear. Are all mudwings this stupid, or are you just deaf? And, like, you could make the excuse, they're dragons, it's battle training. That's a child, and she's hitting him.
Your kids put a quarter in your no yelling sock, and soon you'll have a weapon to...
Also, I'm gonna need to talk about the dragon racism, but we'll get to that. So she continues to just beat the shit out of him. The end of this fun paragraph. This was how battle training of Kestrel always ended, with him unconscious, and then sore or limping for days afterward. Fight back, he thought. Get mad, do something. He tried to summon some helpful violent rage, but all he could think was, it'll be over soon, and then I can go have dinner. I don't even think fucking Harry Potter went this dark. The only one who actually stops this physical abuse before Clay gets quite literally knocked out is the second dragonette under the mountain. And then there's Tsunami. She's basically like if you gave Armin Arlert a dragon Sona and then gave her the personality of Eren Yeager. And by that, I mean she comes from the ocean and she is angry.
No, this is over. I'm gonna put a stop to this. I'll kill them all. Every last one.
Clay responds to the abuse, basically by just gritting his teeth and bearing it. His self-esteem is in the trash, and it doesn't help that he had a traumatic experience as a very small child, where, we'll get to that, but basically he's under this assumption that he's some kind of monster. He thinks there's a devil lurking inside him. He thinks he's going to hurt everyone he loves. mean 7th grade core.
Just remember, no one will ever be able to hate you more than you already hate yourself.
Honestly, someone needs to get this poor boy some Prozac. I think that would fix him. Clay, no. Clay, you have moral OCD. Clay. Tsunami, however, doesn't suffer through it this way. Instead of thinking she's the problem, she thinks everyone else is the problem.
Kill them all. Every last one.
And she is right. So she just comes in, hauls Clay's abuser off of him. The two of them snap at each other a little bit, and then Kestrel stalks away. We learned what Clay did as a kid. Get ready for it. It's terrible. Okay, so he's just been born, cozied up. They just hatched from their eggs. They're all cute and small. And then one of them turns over and starts just beating the shit out of the other one. That was Clay as a baby, allegedly. So no one makes him forget that. And I mean, I guess, you know, if I had a sibling and my sibling tried to do that to me, I also wouldn't. He was negative hours old. Cut him some slack. So Tsunami and Clay just go off to lick their wounds. Clay just mopes in the river for a little bit, and Tsunami is very much like, she's alluding to the fact that she just wants to get out of this place. Like, Clay is thinking, oh, we need to complete the prophecy, but Tsunami's like, the prophecy, f that, I'm gonna find my mom. And they have this little exchange. I wonder what my parents are like, he said. I wonder if any of our parents are still alive, Tsunami said. Clay didn't like to think about that. He knew dragons were dying in the war every day. Kestrel and Webbs brought back news of bloody battles, scorched land, and burning piles of dragon bodies. So I should also state this book takes place in a war. There are 7 dragon tribes, and 5 of them are currently at each other's throats. It's this big Game of Thrones type political drama, and I don't use that word lightly. It's actually surprisingly complicated. The tribes that want to be involved, the tribes that have like a personal stake in it, and the tribes that are just scared. You know, it's interesting how some of the dragons are working from a place, like, obviously we don't know this at this point, but it's interesting how a lot of the dragons are working from a place of, you know, violence and growing hatred and old grudge, that type of thing, or they're working for monetary value, or they've been promised something. But there's other ones who have been threatened, who are basically just fighting in the war because they don't have another choice. And there's 5 different tribes that are all fighting for a different reason, and I have never seen this amount of nuance in a YA book, and this is for children. This is a children's book. I had to bring this to work at the reception job so I could read it on my break, you know, so I could make all the notes I'm currently reading. And I felt really weird about it because I was reading a book meant for 4th graders, but also it has geopolitics. Anyway, so the characters think they might be orphans. They talk about that a little bit longer. And then in the next chapter, we begin to learn... Ugh, my eye, ow. Ow. Fjord moment. You'll get that. So in the second chapter, we meet the other dragonettes. I'll just give a little run through of them. There's Starflight, who basically tries to cope with everything by being hyper competent and, you know, very smart. He's kind of the walking embodiment of this emoji. And then there's Sunny, who's delusional. She's this tiny little... Starflight's a Nightwing, by the way. He's part of the Nightwings. They're basically this tribe of dragons that everyone is afraid of. Mostly because they've got some weird and fucked up powers. They can read minds, foretell the future. They're cool and scary and emo. And no one knows where they live. And they're controlling the world from below. Let's just say if Wendigoon was a dragon in in Wings of Fire and had a YouTube channel in like Wings of Fire, most of the stuff he would be making videos on would be Nightwing shit.
In 1949, the Statue of Liberty went through its renovations, and that's when they started feeding people to it on the reg.
So that's where they stand in this world. So that's Starflight. Sunny is a sandwing, but she's weird looking. She's like, you know, when you get a leopard gecko from the pet store, but it's like weird and kind of fucked up looking. And then, you know, you show it to an actual person who knows leopard geckos and they go, what the fuck is this? And you're like, I don't know, I just picked it up like this. And it's fine. It's not doing anything wrong. It's like a rainwater albino translucent messed up little thing that has a bit of a calcium deficiency. So she just looks weird. And then there's Glory. Glory is the chameleon dragon. She's the one that can basically turn any color of the rainbow, and she's a rainwing. She's from the rainforest. Rain, and she's basically the scapegoat child. The two of the guardians don't like her. See, I'll just read this part. The dragons had all heard many times over about how Glory was a last-minute substitute for the broken Skywing egg. Kestrel and Dune called her a mistake and growled at her a lot. Imagine that for the first 16 years of your dragon life. She acts very, very withdrawn and also very passively suicidal. We get some more description of how awful the under the mountain is. Clay talks about even though he lived under the mountain his whole life, it still hurt to walk on bare rock. He was constantly stubbing his talons, and they always ached by the end of the day. Like, 2E.T. Sutherland has a way of just incorporating the most mundanely uncomfortable things. It's like, this is sad. If it weren't for Glory, Clay thought none of them would know how many colors there were in the world. He wondered what it must be like in the rainforest, where a whole tribe of dragons was that beautiful. Where they live, it's just sad and dark. They talk about how the war started. Basically, there was a Sandwing queen. Her name was Queen Oasis. She was cool, boss bitch of a lizard. And she had 3 daughters, Blister, Blaze, and Burn. All of them suck. When I was a child, I was deeply pro Blaze to the point where I would get into arguments with my friends over how much I thought she was great, when she's kind of just a bit of an airhead, I guess. Honestly, she's just like if a bimbo was a dragon, and slay, honestly. There's Blister, who's this awful snake who literally every time someone tries to draw her, they just make her look like the sexiest fucking butch lesbian. And then there's Burn, who, we'll get to Burn. But they're all they're all allied of different dragon tribes, and the kids get to talk about the war. But the main important thing is that Queen Oasis was killed by a scavenger. What's a scavenger, you might ask? One of us, baby. There's a lot of scavenger violence that happens, and a lot of the violence in this book can be excused because it happens to, dragons, not people. But the thing is, scavengers are people, so there will be scenes where they just get decapitated and ripped limb from limb, and it's just... So Kestrel comes in and breaks up their, they were play acting the war together. It was very cute. Clay was playing the scavenger because he was so big. They made Starflight... The next day, this big, scary Nightwing man comes into their house, looks at the kids, looks at the 3 guardians, assesses all of them, tells Starflight a little bit of handy propaganda about how he's cooler and better than everyone, and then he basically tells the 3 lackluster parents, "What is that?" he said, his voice loaded with enough venom to kill 20 dragons in mid-flight. "There was an accident," Kestrel said. "We lost the Skywing egg, so we had to get another one somewhere." "From the Rainwings?" Morality interrupted scathingly. "It was his idea," Kestrel snarled, whipping her tail towards Webb's. "He brought her egg here." "At least we have 5 dragonettes," Webb said. "That's what matters." Morality peered down his long black snout at Glory. His eyes shifted to Sunny, who let out a tiny squeak and sank a little lower toward the ground. "More like 4.5, he grunted. After that unfortunate meeting, Kestrel quite literally takes Tsunami, the only kid that's been known to fight against her abuse, and Webs emerged from the river, dragging a writhing, hissing ball of blue scales. Kestrel and Dune threw the chain around Tsunami's neck and wrapped it around one of her legs. The three guardians hauled her over to one of the rock columns that stretched from the floor to the ceiling, high above. Dune flung the chain around the column twice, binding Tsunami there, with barely 3 steps to move in any direction. So they've locked up their child. Tsunami tries to antagonize them by singing a wretched old bar song. Oh, the dragonettes are coming. They have a moment of levity before Kestrel suggests binding her mouth shut with chains. Clay sneaks into the river to spy on the guardians while they have a big, scary adult talk. And this happens. Well, I'm not doing it, Webb said. Dune shot him a withering look. No one thought you would. Even though this is your fault, said Kestrel, I still think we need 5 of them, Webb snapped. What's he going to do about that? He'll find us a skywing, Kestrel said. Properly this time. No colorful substitutions. They all went quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. So how and when, Dune said in his no-nonsense military voice. Drowning would be the simplest. He glanced at Webb's. I joined the Towns of Peace to stop killing dragons, Webb said. I won't argue with Morality, but I'm not doing it myself. I fucking hate Webbs. It has to be me, Kestrel said in a choked, tense voice. She's just a rainwing, but she might still be able to get away from you. She nodded at Dune's missing foot and the long scar that ran through his mangled wing. But can you go through with it? Webbs asked. Isn't it too much? We all know what happened. That was totally different, Kestrel snapped. Glory is just a rainwing. I don't care about her. I don't even like her. She blasted a ball of flames at the fire so it blazed up. If you're sure, Webb started. I'll do it tonight while she's sleeping, Kestrel said. I can get in there and break her neck before the others know what I'm doing, especially if the bossy one's safely chained up. Tsunami's the only one who could stop me. Okay, so they're planning on killing their 16-year-old daughter. Fun, fun, fun. Clay realizes that the only way to save Glory would be to go through Tsunami's insane escape plan that she was subtly hinting at earlier in the book. They all discuss it together, and Glory reveals that she honestly doesn't gaff. Starflight shook his head as Glory said, This is really sweet, guys, but you shouldn't get in trouble for me. Morosir likes the rest of you. Just let me handle myself. Stop that, Tsunami snapped at her. Acting like a martyr won't help you right now. Glory bristled. I'm not acting like a martyr. I'm trying to make sure nobody gets killed for no reason. Besides you, Tsunami argued. It's fine if you get killed for no reason. It just doesn't matter, Glory said. I'm not even in the prophecy, so who cares what happens to me? So Clay, being the crocodile-type dinosaur dragon that he is, realizes that he can hold his breath for a bit longer than most of the other more fiery dragon types. So he jumps into the river and basically goes through a 50-page ordeal of him contemplating his mortality as he slips through the world's worst slide and took the longest, deepest breath of his life, hoping it wouldn't be his last. The water closed over his head in an awful, final kind of way. He tried not to think about it. Clay spends the next about 20 pages being absolutely terrified as he's swimming through this enclosed, claustrophobic, underwater chamber. It's really quite scary, and I can't properly describe how just oppressive and nerve-wracking it is. Because as a kid, one of the scariest things that you deal with on a, I'd say, monthly basis is trips to the pool, you know? You go underwater, you hold your breath, you go up and you get more air when your lungs are about to explode. But every child has had that fear of like, what if I don't get to go up? What if there is no up? What if I'm just going to die in here in this fish tank? Clay makes his way through the river and he accidentally, I don't really know how this happens, but I think the Guardians set up some acid on the walls, so he hits that and his scales almost dissolve, and that's weird, but I think I was a bit more confused as a child, like, why the fuck is there acid on the walls, to really notice it. But Tsunami catches up with him. They manage to wrench her out of the chains, and together the two of them escape. They're free, they're out, things are great, everything's fantastic. Outside is beautiful. Clay finally feels what mud is, and it's great. Tsunami dislocates her wing, but that's fine. They just ram her into a tree. It's fine. And that's when we meet arguably the scariest character in the entire series, Queen Scarlet, who in the audiobook version sounds so cunty. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know this is a dragon woman, but just...
The orange dragon tilted her head at Clay. A sea wing and a mud wing together, she said. Let's see. I know you're not from my dungeons unless I'm getting horribly forgetful. So who was holding you? Blaze? I don't think she has prison camps. Wouldn't fit with her everybody love me act. Clay took another step back.
This is probably how Donkey felt. So Scarlet shows up, she scares them. She's this menacing orange dragon, which we just need to take a moment to acknowledge the fact she's orange. Like, her name's Scarlet, and she's orange. She shows up, she scares them. They encounter a scavenger, she rips its head off. That's a little gruesome. And then the two of them manage to find their way back to the cave where they were gonna, loop back around and come back for everyone else. That was the plan. Clay or Tsunami goes into the river. They escape and they find the door on the opposite side because the door only locks from the inside. So they have to fly around the mountain, find the entrance to their cave, find the secret key that's hidden under the doormat, open it up, and then everyone can go free. And hopefully Glory won't be killed. Glory, who's currently hiding. And they managed to get that far only by pissing off the Queen of the Skywings, who just so happened to be out on a little rich person's stroll, killing humans and collecting her treasure. They both horribly offended her, as well as attacked her, but things go poorly. They reach the door, they find the key under the mat, they click it open, they're in, it's all going great, and then Scarlet is right behind them. I haven't seen Kestrel in, 7 years? Queen Scarlet said in a pleasant voice that didn't match the rage in her eyes. What a fun reunion this is going to be. She whipped her tail back and forth behind her. All my least favorite dragons in one place. You followed us here, Tsunami said in a choked voice. Oh, I didn't have to, said the queen. Someone sent up a lovely, helpful smoke signal for me. Let us all right here. What a brilliant idea. My idea, Clay thought. Horrified. This is my fault. I brought the Skywings down on us. Yeah, buddy, your morality OCD isn't gonna let you live this one down. Who are you? Sunny squeaked. Now, really, this is getting insulting, said the queen. You're in my territory. Apparently you've lived under my mountain. I am only the most important dragon for hundreds of miles. How dare you not recognize me? Queen Scarlet of the Skywings, Starflight breathed. He crouched low, touching his head to the floor and crossing his front talons together. Now that's more like it, she said, striding into the cave. 3 moons, it's gloomy in here. You know things are bad when even the richest, most fucked up dragon of all time looks at your room and goes, Bitch, you live like this? My goodness, Queen Scarlet said, squinting. You're Nightwing! She batted Clay aside as if he were made of leaves and grabbed Starflight's chin. Clay scrambled up again and took a step toward her, but the clanking of armor and the grim expressions of the Skywings spilling into the cave made him stop. A Nightwing not yet 10 years old, Queen Scarlet said, turning Starflight around and prodding his scales like he was a cow she planned to eat for dinner. How thrilling! They don't normally let their dragonettes out into the world, where you might corrupt their superior perfection or something, you know. She breathed smoke into his face and he coughed. I've never had a Nightwing in my arena before. Thrilling, thrilling. Tell me, what am I thinking right now? Starflight's expression was pure terror. Too hard, Queen Scarlet teased. I'll give you a hint. I'm thinking. Now why would a Nightwing, a Seawing, and a Mudwing be hiding out under my mountain? And whatever those two are that the Mudwing is cutely trying to protect? She flicked her tail at Glory and Sunny. Clay shivered as the queen leaned closer to Starflight. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain prophecy, would it? So, Queen Scarlet is basically toxic Yuri with Burn. Burn being the dragon that just killed an egg in the prologue, as well as Vito, but we don't really care about Vito. Burn does not believe in the prophecy, mostly because the prophecy would never in its right mind say she could be queen because there's something deeply wrong with her. So her basic objective is kill every single thing related to the prophecy as soon as possible. Here's the thing. Burn is allied with the Skywings and the Mudwings. The Skywings are, following under Queen Scarlet. Queen Scarlet, who, like I said, is in toxic Yuri with Burn. There's also Queen Moorhen, the Queen of the Mudwings, who's also part of this trio. Unfortunately, Queen Moorhen does not actually want to be in the war, and we'll find out about this later on, but basically all of the warm-toned dragons are all cooped together against all of the other dragons in this big, brutal, violent, fiery frontier. And the Mudwings don't want to be in it, but because their territory is sandwiched in a very precarious spot, they know that if they don't fight on the side of the Skywings, they're basically screwed. Because, if Burn and the Skywings, they already have plenty of power. If they win the war, then they're just going to attack the Mudwings again out of revenge. And also because they want their swamp. For the politics here, Queen Scarlet is pissed off that Clay, a Mudwing, didn't recognize her. His social awkwardness was what allowed her to realize he was actually part of the prophecy and had not been raised in a traditional Mudwing household. If Tsunami had not interfered and had, Clay had just gotten out of the river like the original plan was, even if he did encounter Queen Scarlet, he might have been able to talk his way out of the situation because they were allies. So in Tsunami doubting his competence, she actually ended up, kind of messing everything up, but I don't blame her. I don't blame her. So the Guardians show up, like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you killing our children? Only we're supposed to do that. It should also be noted, as you probably saw in that segment I read out loud, Queen Scarlet's a little touchy and obsessed with Starflight, and it's because he's the Nightwing. It's not really meant to be predatory, but every single time she, grabs him or says something kind of uncomfortable, I just get the feeling that, Scarlet's an icky character that only gets more icky the older you are and the more you're like, oh my god, get a job, woman. Leave him alone. Get a job. You're so weird. We haven't even gotten to the arena yet. So basically, Kestrel gets taken as prisoner. Webbs runs away. I fucking hate Webbs. Now, you must be thinking, what happens to Dune? My favorite character, Dune. Take them all, Queen Scarlet announced. Except this one, of course. She shook Dune lightly, as if she were shaking the fluff off a dead pigeon. He clawed at her talons, his eyes bulging. I mean, what use is a crippled dragon who can't fly? I'm surprised you haven't killed yourself already, Sandwing. But I can take care of that for you. No! Sunny screamed, leaping at them. And it was too late. With a chilling crack, Queen Scarlet snapped Dune's neck and dropped his body on the stone floor. Dune! Sunny howled. She squirmed past Scarlet and crouched beside him, shaking him with her front talons. His mangled wing flopped and his scales scraped against the rocks. His black eyes were empty. Dune, wake up! There's a lot of things that could be said about that passage, but I'm not going to say any of them. I think you were all thinking it. Okay, now that's part 1 of this book. It's only worse from here. So I'm watching Game of Thrones with my papa, and one thing about, I believe, the end part of season 1 is this prison that Tyrion Lannister ends up in. Now, I could talk about the woman breastfeeding her 8-year-old son, but I'm not going to. Instead, I want to talk about the weird prison setup that they have. Now, their prison system only has 3 walls. The other wall is just open to the air, and the floor is on a slight tilt, so if you fall asleep, your body will subconsciously kind of roll down the tilt like a car who didn't have the parking brake put on, and you will basically wake up every night right on the verge of a very grisly and painful way down. And the thing that show really goes into is the psychological fear of being confined in a really, really high up place. And that's exactly the sort of psychological prison torture that the Skywings like to infect upon the dragons unlucky enough to end up in their grasp. For the first whole day, Clay kept his eyes shut. His talons gripped the rocks below him so tightly he started to lose feeling in his legs. One glance over the edge, one glimpse of the dizzying drop below him, and he feared he would lose consciousness and fall. with his wings folded over and clamped in skywing metal clips. Falling meant death. Horrible, painful, bone-shattering death. But then he wasn't entirely sure if that would be worse than Scarlet's plans for them, whatever they were. His prison cell was at the top of a towering spire of rock. A narrow stone platform gave him just enough room to walk in a circle and lie down. There were no walls, there was no roof, there was only open blue sky and the fierce wind whistling around his ears day and night. So Clay's on these little nightmarish death pedestals, and there are a lot of these. They're basically in this formation around a gladiator arena, which is used for basically everything that you would expect a gladiator arena to be used in a book as violent as this one. There's other prisoners of war, from ice wings to sea wings to sand wings that supported Blaze. And it's just an extremely grim sight. I think I should say that when I was like 10, when I played Minecraft, I think multiple times I mined cobblestone and tried to recreate these spires just because I thought they were kind of cool. So I would like break the sky limit, making this stone pillar upwards, and then I'd make a little like 2x2 platform at the top, and then I'd put like a pig up there or maybe a cow, and I'd just do that a bunch of times. But every single time I tried, the animals would just prefer to plummet over the edge instead of staying up there. And that, I know that was just a glitch in their programming. They weren't meant to be on such a small piece of land, but at the same time, it just made me realize, as a kid, I had no idea how fucked up this actually was. And I mean that. I was the type of kid who would play Wings of Fire with my My Little Pony dolls. And in my head, it was an occasionally dark, but mostly just fun, occasionally violent kids series. I didn't think about the implication. I didn't think about the psychological torture. I didn't think about the fact that if a sentient being were to be in this position, they might just make like the Minecraft pigs and fall. So Clay's in agony, and that is when he meets arguably the most traumatized dragon in this entire series. And I know you're probably looking at Glory and thinking, really? Did someone tops that? Yes. Throughout this entire read, I was calling Peril in my head the Aloise Trancy of... the Aloise Trancy of dragons.
Come on, wake up. What's wrong with you? You can't be... No. Please, no. Don't leave me alone! Please don't!
Peril is this slightly older, I'd say 18-year-old, fiery skywing. She's a bright shade of copper. Her eyes are weirdly blue, and she seems to take a particular amount of joy in just flying around the prisoners, talking to them, bringing them food that's always just a little bit too burnt. And Clay doesn't really know what to make of her, but she wishes him well on the arena. She says that she's the champion, and so she's got to do her job, and that she's looking forward to fighting him because she hasn't fought a Mudwing before, because they are technically allies. If Queen Moorhen didn't sign away her entire population, then I'm sure Peril would have had the joy of fighting many Mudwings. So Clay looks down at the arena, at the first battle that we ever see of the arena, the opening act of the arena, and after confirming that Tsunami and Starflight are also stuck on the awful nightmarish suicide spires, he basically decides that, you know, he's got to learn a thing or two about this battle. It can't be worse than the way his mom used to beat him. So Peril's up against this lizardy sand dragon named Horizon. He's apparently a really good soldier, but as soon as he sees her, he just starts acting like a scared sheep. Horizon crouched and then suddenly leaped over Peril's head and fled to the other side of the arena. He didn't try to claw her or strike her on the way past. He didn't even lash out with his poisonous tail. He just ran away. So Peril continues to chase him around before eventually, after getting a few attacks in, he just turns and does this. Horizon turned and grabbed her forearms in his talons. He threw his wings around her and buried his face in her shoulder with a high-pitched, keening sound. Peril froze, smoke billowed off the two dragons, and black marks crawled along Horizon's wings until they were starting to disintegrate into ash. He crumpled slowly to the ground, and Peril crouched with him, holding him up with her wings. A violent shudder went through the sandwing's whole body. He let go of Peril and flopped slowly onto his side on the sand. Disfiguring burns had melted his facial features, and his wings were charred into black strands between large holes. His talons had scorch marks in the center of their palms. So basically, Peril cannot be touched. Peril is constantly on fire. She's a fire dragon with too much fire. And so this embrace of death is the closest thing she's ever had to physical contact, and the closest thing she ever will have to physical contact in her life in the arena. Peril is an 18-year-old girl. Peril has never been hugged in a way that hasn't resulted in someone quite literally crumbling into a pile of cinders.
No, please no. Don't leave me alone!
Peril is the champion, and she kills dragons every single day for the queen's amusement. I didn't mention, so Scarlet has been watching all of this happen gleefully from her little balcony. She's wearing her cunty little dragon outfits made of gold and jewels, and she has a decoration with her. Glory, the wonderful, passively suicidal, emotionally distraught Glory, has been taken out and basically displayed like some weird, colorful work of art. Because Glory can change the color of her scales, basically she's a walking mood ring. Put her out in the sun and she turns all sorts of wonderful colors. Peril comes up to Clay at the end, and she's basically the embodiment of this emoji. You know, she doesn't... That's the interesting thing about this. Peril is a child, like she's definitely been manipulated, but the story doesn't frame her as an unambiguous monster. Maybe that's because we're coming from Clay's perspective, and Clay has such bad moral OCD that Peril will say, oh yeah, I've killed thousands of dragons, and Clay will be like, oh, my intrusive thoughts say I'm just as bad as you, and then they'll shake hands. They have a little interaction. Peril brings him some overly microwaved duck, and they talk. Aren't you afraid of me, now that you've seen what I can do? Of course I am, he said honestly. But you're still better company than the pigeons. That was weird today, wasn't it? What was weird? The sandwing, Horizon, the way he just gave up. She opened and closed her wings, and Clay flinched. Why would he do that? Peril went on. It's poor form. I guess I should have pushed him away to make him keep fighting. Her Majesty was pretty angry. At you? Clay said. That doesn't seem fair. Peril blinked again. Really? She said. It doesn't. She shook her head. No, the queen is right. It's my responsibility to make the fight exciting if the other dragon won't do it. Why do you do what she says? Clay asked. Do you like fighting? What he really wanted to ask was, do you like killing? But he was afraid of what the answer might be. Would he like killing if he'd been given the chance to do it over and over again with no consequences? Was that the kind of dragon he was supposed to be? Would he like it if he had to go do it tomorrow in the arena? Of course, Peril said. I'm good at fighting, and not much else. She's my queen. I'm her champion. Why you? Clay asked, risking getting closer to his real question. What's wrong with you? No one else wants me, Peril said, matter-of-factly. No one can even touch me. You saw that. I was born of too much fire. Usually when dragons like me hatch, the Skywings drop them off the highest mountain peak. That's what my mother was going to do, but Queen Scarlet saved me and killed her to punish her. And her eyes went cold at the word my mother. Wow, Clay said faintly. I think the book honestly speaks for itself in regards to these kinds of things, but they have a very meaningful little conversation. Clay and this very messed up girl. Peril was the first dragon he'd met outside the mountain, if you didn't count Queen Scarlet. Maybe she wasn't as strange as he thought. Maybe switching between friendly conversation and violence was normal for a dragon. but somehow he didn't think so. Was she right about her true nature? If he'd been raised like her, killing dragons and feeding the monster inside him, maybe he'd be less worried all the time. Maybe he needed to accept that part of him, like she had. But would his friends still like him? Would he be more or less worthy of the prophecy that way? One thing was for sure. Whenever he did end up in the arena, he'd find out how he felt about killing pretty fast. So the next chapter, he ends up in the arena. Scarlet summons them all to her throne room, and she basically just threatens them. She tells them about how awesome it is that she has a teenager as a decoration, and then she mentions what's gonna happen to Sunny, because like I said, Tsunami and Starflight and Clay are all doomed for the arena. Glory is doomed to be a prop, and we haven't heard anything about sweet little delusional Sunny. Oh no! Excuse me, Your Majesty, Clay said. Where's Sunny? Is she alright? Oh, the funny-looking sandwing, Queen Scarlet said. I think Byrne will like her very much. She collects curiosities. You should see her palace. It's quite horrifying, full of two-headed lizards and seven-toed dragon talons and stuffed scavengers with the palest skin you've ever seen. She shuddered. That misshapen dragonette will be the perfect present for her. And I just want to say, imagine if these weren't dragons. Byrne has a tower full of the body parts of deformed, different, and disabled people. She has a taxidermied tower full of that. Why does she need that? What the fuck? Was there ever a Skywing to complete the prophecy? Is there some, miracle fifth dragonette that's going to show up and be like, ha! I'm the Skywing! I was born on the brightest night! I'm just like you! Or did that ship sail as soon as that egg was tossed over the side of the mountain? Scarlet looked amused again. That's what you think, she said. Hilarious! As if you'd have survived this long out here. Your minders did tell you what happened to all the other dragonettes born on the brightest night, didn't they? Starflight inhaled sharply. He and Tsunami exchanged glances, but Clay didn't understand. The Guardians never mentioned any other dragonettes born on the brightest night, like they were. Tisk, tisk, Queen Scarlet said, seeing the surprise on their faces. Well, I won't go into the details, but it was very sad. The word I'm looking for is infanticide. So Scarlet basically hypes them up for the arena, and Clay goes, I volunteer as tribute! My moral OCD would make me literally die if no one else went in before me, with his big, sad brown eyes, and Tsunami's glaring at him like, what the fuck? I'm the one that fights. I'm the one that fights. You always get beaten by Mom. Like, I'm the one that beats Mom. And Starflight's just sitting there in the corner, like, so Clay gets hauled into the arena, and that's where he meets Fjord. You might have remembered I was mentioning Fjord when I was rubbing God knows what out of my eye. We will get to that. Hello, Clay said as the ice wing drew closer. Fjord, right? Fjord stopped and stared at him, still flicking his tongue in and out. He was only a head taller than Clay, but he looked a lot older and scarier. I've never met an ice wing, Clay said, edging back a step. I've never met much of anyone, really. I mean, I guess I read that you were all the color of ice, but I didn't realize ice came in so many colors. Like, blue. Very surprising. It's cool, though. No pun intended. Are you trying to get us both killed? The Icewing growled. Shut up and let me kill you. I'd rather not, Clay said, stumbling back another few steps. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and he glanced up into the sky. Starflight was nearly leaning all the way off his column, flailing his tail and bound wings frantically at Clay, trying to tell him something. But what? Something about ice wings. Something they'd learned from scrolls and lectures. Something pretty important, judging by the way Starflight was freaking out. The Nightwing was pointing at his mouth. Fire? Clay looked at Fjord dubiously. He didn't think ice wings could breathe fire. Wouldn't they end up melting their palaces every time they used it? Then again, Fjord was definitely doing something with his mouth, and it wasn't smiling. Clay ducked and rolled out of the way just as a blast of what looked like sparkling smoke shot out of Fjord's mouth. A tiny bit of it brushed his wingtip, and Clay felt a horrible chill rattle through his whole body. Oh, right, freezing death breath. That is important. Thanks, Starflight. The battle basically continues with Clay fail-boying his way around, trying not to die. He gets a few hits in, but obviously this 16-year-old boy has nothing on this 30-something-year-old Arctic soldier. Fjord basically quits playing and just decides, okay, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And that's when Tsunami makes like one of those pigs in Minecraft and throws herself off the side of her little spire, trying to get them to stop. Now, one thing I should mention about the spires that I didn't get the chance to do with my Minecraft pigs, which I will do if I ever repeat that experiment, is the fact that they're kind of all tied together by these very thin wires. So basically, if I were to be realistic, all of the pigs would have leads attached to one another. So if one of them were to fall, all of them were to drag each other down. This is a way of making it so even if the prisoners' wings were, mobile, which they are not, they would all be dooming each other if they took the easy way out. It's a nice way of keeping them from doing exactly that, because God knows they want to. So Tsunami flails herself off of her spire and drags everyone else down, and they all are like grabbing onto their stone spires, and she's caught midair like a fish on a line, and they're all yelling at her, and it's terrible. Everyone's distracted. Fjord looks up, and just as he does, this weird black ink splatters across his face. So Clay was the only one looking at the ice dragon when a small jet of black droplets splattered against the side of Fjord's face and neck. Fjord flinched in surprise and automatically reached up with one talon to wipe his face clean, but before his claws reached his snout, both dragons heard a sizzling noise. Clay stared in shock as the black drops started to bubble and smoke, and the scales underneath them began to melt, and then Fjord screamed. It was the worst sound Clay had ever heard. The dragon Peril had killed screamed this kind of agony, but to be right underneath the dying dragon, his screams piercing Clay's ears, was so much worse. One of the drops had landed in Fjord's eye, and that was the first thing to disintegrate, leaving a smoking black cavity in his skull. The side of his face slowly dropped away like ice melting. Fjord lurched off Clay, clawing at his own neck. The spray was eating into his open wound. And then, after a little ellipsis, we get the line, "After Fjord finally died, to the sounds of uproarious cheering, Clay was flown back to his tower and locked down again." Really paints a picture. I've heard rumors about a Wings of Fire show being put in the works, and it really just makes me wonder, how on earth is this type of thing going to be sanitized? A dragon isn't dying a slow, agonizing death, having his face melted by mysterious black goo, then I don't want it. So Peril wants to basically hide behind Clay so she can watch in on this trial for Kestrel, who betrayed Scarlet some years ago. I don't know, they've got a weird toxic Yuri thing going on. But basically, Peril wants to go somewhere she's not allowed, and she basically asks Clay, "Hey, bro, can you cover for me? We're kind of friends, right?" And he was like, "Okay." She also brings him mud for the wounds that Fjord managed to get into him, which is good. I think, Peril does have a heart, despite the allegations. Nothing too much of note happens during the trial. It's basically Scarlet berating Kestrel about all of the things she did wrong to deserve this, and then this older dragon who's got a paralyzed tail named Osprey trying to defend her. As I should mention, dragons can't really rebel against their queens because they are violently monarchy based, and the only way a queen can be uprooted is if she is killed by one of her own daughters. It doesn't look like Scarlet's going anywhere anytime soon. So what we find out, shocking almost no one, is that Kestrel is actually Peril's mother. Kestrel was supposed to kill Peril when she was a dragonette, but opted to kill her useless twin brother instead. Peril always thought she killed her twin brother, ate him in the womb, but she didn't. It was her mom. It was a post-term abortion. It was, I need to stop making abortion jokes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the men who are probably clutching their pearls about this. I know most of the women in my audience are going like, Scarlet kills Osprey because he annoyed her. She grabs a hold of him. She flies really high up, and then she drops him. She does this to an old man dragon. 2024 presidential election before Biden stepped out joke. And then Peril initiates a thing called the Champion's Shield, where she's basically like, you can't kill my abusive mom that I didn't know I had. She basically goes, if I win the next battle, then my mom goes free. And I always win because I literally can't touch anything. And Scarlet, for some reason, agrees to this. We are entering the final act of the story. Wings of Fire books are generally structured like this. You know, they have build up, build up, build up, build up, and then they have this one stretch of like maybe 50 pages that I'd like to call the fucking, because that's where everything goes completely fucking wrong. It's the most violent, it's the most intense, and if I were to try and, you know, point out specific scenes, I think we would be here all day because so many things are happening, a new messed up things happening every single chapter, every single page, every other paragraph, that I just need to just continue it in a straight up line of consciousness. So welcome to the first climax of Wings of Fire. It's Queen Scarlet's birthday. And that means that she's going to execute all of the Dragonettes of Destiny for her special day. Her toxic, Yuriful girlfriend, Byrne, has shown up with her Sandwing army, and they are currently feasting and partying in the Skywing Kingdom. Clay, however, is finally reunited with his friends. But this is only because he managed to disrupt the party for about 5 minutes. See, when Peril was so furious about Kestrel being her mom, she leaped off the little spire and accidentally ended up burning the binds that were attaching Clay to everyone else. So suddenly, he's just a lone man with a giant, very thin piece of metal. What does he do? He plays violin with it. He's just sitting up there. He can hear the uproarious, bloodthirsty party down below. Byrne and Scarlet are making out, sloppy. And Clay just takes metal to metal and plays the violin. He plays that song that Tsunami was singing in Rebellion when she was first being chained against the wall by their abusive parents. You know, like, oh, the Dragonettes are coming. They're coming to save the day. I have no clue how the tune goes, but he plays it, but a sad acoustic version in E minor. And all of the other prisoners who have had their souls broken by the awful Sky Dungeon begin to sing along in this solemn, ghostly trance. And then some of the soldiers come out and tell him to shut the fuck up. Clay gets hauled off the spire, and he reunites with the other Dragonettes. They're all basically thrown into Peril's room and walled in by a bunch of flaming hot rocks. They're just trapped. This is so they don't interrupt the party. Their festivities are going to happen the next morning. Clay meets up with Peril because she's like, yo, why are you in my room? Hi. He's like, hi. Hey, my beautiful princess, can you please help us? Please. One neurodivergent person to another. I know you kill people, and my OCD makes me think I kill people. But can you please do me a solid? And so literally all of his friends are just giving him that look that like you give your friend when they pull the baddest, most just morally compromisable bitch imaginable. Like, you know, the look, you got the whole squad laughing. Like, they're all mortified by Clay's fiery hot new girlfriend. But Peril does agree to help them. The them being Tsunami and Starflight. Sunny is still somewhere, and Glory is still being used as the dragon equivalent of a screensaver. However, as they try to sneak out delicately across the side of the mountain, Peril comes back and reports them to Queen Scarlet. Unfortunately, she could not break out. She could not get away. This one random man being kind to her for 2 days was not enough to undo the 8 years of Scarlet's brainwashing. They all get dragged back into the cave and guarded until morning comes. And morning is where things get really interesting. So, for one thing, they make all of the Dragonettes participate in the arena matches. Up first is Tsunami, and she's fighting a dehydrated sea wing. They're a water thing. They're not supposed to be dehydrated. You know what? How about I just give the explanation, the description of him, just so you can see what I see? The writhing sea wing landed hard on the sands, dropped by the guards. He was twice as big as Tsunami, with talons as sharp and curved as fish hooks. Dried blood flecked his mouth as if he'd been trying to drink his own veins. His scales were dull and crusted, and his dark green eyes were bloodshot and rolling wildly in his emaciated skull. He looked completely insane. Dehydrated, mentally unstable, and ready to fight at last. It's Gil of the Sea Wings. Claws up, tails ready, fight! Gil didn't wait for Vermilion's order. He tore across the sand towards Tsunami as soon as he'd recovered his balance. His mouth was open as if he thought he was roaring, but no sound came out. His tongue, purple and swollen, lolled to the side. So Tsunami kills him, and it isn't really that much of a moral debate because really there's no reasoning with him. They drop Starflight down, expecting her to kill him, but the two of them just give each other a little hug. Aww. Byrne and Scarlet are not entertained by the 2024 Olympics, so they're just bitching together on their thrones. And that's when the scavengers appear. Basically, they throw a bunch of humans in and have the dragons brutally kill them, but Starflight is just so illy prepared for it that he just gets beaten up by a few humans. Like, okay, nerd. Finally, Tsunami is wrangled away, and we get a very interesting little bit of dragon lore. See, Icewings fucking hate Nightwings. They hate them. And so, because Scarlet has plenty of Icewing soldiers, she decides that because it's her birthday and she's not been adequately entertained, she should just have all 14 of the Icewing prisoners just set down on the sand and just basically have them... I don't really know what she intended for them to do. I think she just wanted to watch them rip Starflight open. Just basically set a 16-year-old child in front of a group of 14 tortured prisoners of war, former soldiers who all have a racial bias against him, and just let it happen. This child that couldn't even fight a human. Before she can do that, Morosir, remember that ugly fuck from the beginning? He descends from the clouds, or a bunch of Nightwings come, and they just swoop in, they attack, they leave, they grab Starflight, they leave, and Byrne and Scarlet are just left gagged. Like, what the fuck just happened? What do you mean our boy got teleported? We wanted to watch him get mutilated. Huh? And also the Nightwings literally did not even come back for Tsunami or Clay or Glory or Sunny. They just grabbed Starflight and left. In outrage, Queen Scarlet finally fulfills the champion's shield and brings Peril, an adversary she cannot win against, Clay. So here's the thing. Clay was stated in the prophecy to have been born from a blood-red egg. Mudwings are like the most boring basic dragon tribe out there. They're basically kind of big crocodile hippo things, a little bit of T-Rex in there, but they're mostly just kind of the graham cracker of dragons. However, sometimes they are born with unusual powers, that being the ability to just resist fire, because obviously in rock, paper, scissors, mud beats fire. So Clay, due to the specific, requirements of his egg, actually is immune to fire, which means Peril can hug him and that won't kill him. Now, this is a new development that they picked up, when she was busy betraying everyone. So with her being able to, basically get her ass whooped by someone who actually can whoop her, because the act of whooping her wouldn't turn him into a pile of cinders, Peril is at a loss. Clay's about to beat her up. And this is where the two of them have their final little confrontation. "I'm sorry," she said plaintively. "I know you're mad. I made a mistake. I thought you were trying to get away from me. Well, I am now. I don't want to kill you, but you have to. I had a whole plan. A plan where I saved you after Kestrel, and you liked me best of all." "Peril, that's insane. I don't care if you save me. I want you to save my friends. That's what's important to me. I'm your friend. You don't need them." She leapt at his head and he shoved himself upward, throwing her over him and into the wall. He was across the arena again by the time she was able to crawl to her feet. "I'll stick with the friends who aren't trying to kill me, thanks," he called. "I'm not..." Well, she stamped her talons again. "It's not fair. The others can have any dragon. I only want you." Her wings snapped open and she leaped up and then dove at him with her claws outstretched. Clay snatched a talonful of sand and threw it in her eyes. She shrieked and blundered sideways in the air. He leaped to grab her shoulders and flung her to the ground. He rolled her onto her back and sat on her, looking down into her face. I know I don't know much about anything, but I think it doesn't have to work like this. It does! Peril struggled to push him off, her talons shoved ineffectively at him. Dragons kill each other all the time. It's war in here, anywhere, for no reason at all. That's how we are, especially you and me. We're the same. We're dangerous. That's not how I am. No matter what happened when I hatched, I can't feel this killer inside me that's supposed to be there. Maybe that's what the prophecy is about. Maybe the dragons are supposed to show everyone how to get along without a lot of killing. He noticed the closest dragons in the audience were leaning in, listening intently. He hadn't been speaking for the whole stadium to hear, but at least a few had. Queen Scarlet wasn't among them. Hurry up and do it then, she called from her balcony. You have her at your mercy. Use your venom. That was thrilling, and I didn't even get to see it the first time. Clay and Peril stared at each other for a moment. Did she just say what I think she said? But the venom didn't come from her? Peril said. Then why? Clay whipped around to face the balcony as Glory suddenly reared up in a blaze of sunflower gold and cobalt blue. She snapped her thin chain like a reed and launched herself off the marble tree. Her mouth was wide open, hinged like a snake's. She hissed and a jet of black liquid shot out of her two longest fangs. Byrne shoved Queen Scarlet in front of her and shot into the sky. Glory's venom hit Scarlet on the side of her face. The Skywing Queen began to scream. So Glory's okay. Wings of Fire books have a lot of really, really messed up concepts in them. However, none of it is really gratuitous or put in without there being a purpose. The fact that Fjord just randomly got his face melted off was necessary for the much more cathartic scene where Queen Scarlet got her face melted off. We needed to know about the face melting. Similarly, we needed to see Horizon get violently burnt, simply because we needed to know how dangerous Peril was, so when Clay was able to touch her and talk to her and actually reach out to her, it had some real impact. You can go about saying that this character is deadly, saying that this character hurts everything she touches, but that's not even going to mean a thing if you don't show the actual pain and defeat and horror of what she can do. The same way you can't just say a world is incredibly brutal without showing how brutal the world is. Scarlet killed Dune because she didn't think he'd be interesting on the battlefield because he had only one foot. Kestrel and Webbs and Dune had all deluded themselves into thinking they were acting for the sake of the prophecy. Tsunami and Glory and Clay are all messy dragons that either reflect their anger onto themselves or direct it outwards. And some of them have killed people. By the end of the book, they have. Things are just never as simple as they look. Scarlet is a terrible dragon, an absolute child and a pest. But the thing is, as horrible as she is, she's not alone. Byrne is just as horrible. And that's kind of what the book's about. Questioning authority, looking at a dragon world. A world that was designed to make you feel as disconnected from the dragons and the humanity of the dragons as physically possible. We are told over and over again, they are dragons. It doesn't matter if they die as children. It doesn't matter if they're killed. It doesn't matter if they're wounded. It doesn't matter how much pain they're in, because this is a dragon. This is not a boy. This is not a human being. This is not a person. You can distance yourself because this isn't a person. Well, I have news for you, bucko. If it thinks like a person, if it has a society like a person, if it has moral OCD like a person, this is a person. This is a 16-year-old boy. This is not a lizard. This is a sophomore in high school. This is a sophomore in high school, and he just fought in the world's worst tournament arc, and I did not understand any of it when I first read it because I was 8. The nuances, they're so tasty. Clay and co managed to escape the Skywings in the chaos. They free Kestrel, which is a very interesting scene because Clay is sort of iffy on her, you know, their adopted mom that used to beat him. Glory does not. Let me read out the scene where they rescue Kestrel, because I honestly think it does a very good job of characterizing how the story views abusers. Clay, wait, Peril said. Her copper wings shivered, and she clenched her talons as if she were about to split in two. My mother, if Queen Scarlet isn't dead, the first thing she'll do is kill her. She's right, Clay said as Tsunami and Glory came winging back to see why they hadn't moved. Tsunami, we have to get Kestrel out. Why? Tsunami challenged. What do we care? Kestrel was awful to us. We care anyway, Sunny said softly. We can't help it, even you. I don't, Glory said. She was going to kill me, remember? Clay did remember. He remembered every cruel word, every vicious bite, but he also remembered Kestrel offering herself to Queen Scarlet in their place, and he remembered the scars on her palms and the look on her face when she saw that Peril wasn't dead. She didn't raise us to care about her, Tsunami argued. Kestrel is just keeping us alive, and if that's what she wants, the best thing we can do is run away right now. I'd like to be something more than alive, Clay said fiercely. I'd like to be the kind of dragon she doesn't think I am, the kind they write prophecies about, the dragon who would rescue her no matter how awful she is. Now, obviously, this whole, oh, you need to forgive your abuser, oh, you're too morally good to kill anyone, oh, like this whole, like, mindset, it's very infuriating to a lot of abuse survivors to the point where there's, like, a literal section of it on the trigger warning site, does the dog die? An entire thing of, like, does an abused forgive their abuser? Because it's just that upsetting to a lot of people. And now normally I would be in that camp. However, as soon as Clay does that, both Tsunami and Glory, who, you know, have slightly different perspectives on this, just stare at him. They are not thrilled with this idea. They actually hate it. But in the end, he's their brother, and what's Kestrel even gonna do? So they go back in, they rescue her. She's not grateful, by the way. They talk briefly, a little bit, and she wings off, says goodbye to them. She's gone. Woo, big whoop. On a reread, as a child, I always wanted her to have a redemption arc. Like, I always wanted her and Webbs and Dune to just find it in themselves to be better parents, you know, to treat the children right, to be kind people. That was not going to happen. That was never going to happen. They were not going to do that because they are awful. I mean, Webbs kind of is, but children have a very innocent view of how abuse situations work. They don't take things in a victim-centered way. They don't. And, you know, that's fine. I think maturing is realizing that there's nuances in things, and just because someone's your parent doesn't mean you have to wish for them to suddenly grow a heart. That being said, I feel very weird about the strange Wings of Fire fanfiction I used to write in the back of my math notebook when I was a little kid. You know, the ones where everything worked out, where they were kind and not awful. Now that I look at Kestrel and I see the kind of pathetic woman that she is, my lip just curls a little bit in disgust. So Peril leaves. They split in different directions. Peril decides to go back for Queen Scarlet because she's her queen. We'll just see if Queen Scarlet's still alive. I mean, maybe not her entire face got melted off. And that launches us into part 3. The Dragonettes are free. They are free and they are in the mud. They are free and they're out of the Sky Kingdom. What crimes will they commit? The last part of the book is generally the most chill and normal. Not as much terrible stuff happens. It's honestly pretty good. Basically, Clay ends up meeting his family, you could say. He finds out that Mudwings function in a very different way than other dragon families, which are a little bit more human-like. Basically, the parents are not involved at all in the structure of the Dragonette's survival. The dragons just all collect together as siblings and work as a pack, a team. And the reason that Clay attacked his siblings when they were all hatching from their eggs was because of an instinctual need to try and break his siblings, you know, out of their eggs. And due to the other dragon's ignorance, they just rephrased it as him being a monster, him trying to kill them when they were tiny and helpless. He wasn't trying to kill them, he was trying to free them. And it really just goes to show the fact that Kestrel and Dune and Webbs didn't know shit about themselves because they are stupidly xenophobic and dragon racist. Read a scroll outside of your own tribe, why don't you? It ends with a big group hug. Clay acknowledging his role as a big brother and willing away his moral OCD. And for the rest of the series, he will always be kind of in the background. You don't see him as much as having a constant crisis. He's good for a initial dragon, you know, to start the story off because he's a bit slow on the uptake and he makes a lot of kind of, plaintively kind decisions that the other characters might disagree with. I think it's nice that we started off with his neutral take on Kestrel as opposed to Tsunami or Glory's complicated take. Oh, I forgot to mention, as soon as they escape the Skywing Palace, the Nightwings come down and they just set Starflight back down on the ground and then they leave. I can't believe I forgot Starflight. Sorry, little buddy. I'm just a step away, I'm just a breath away, losing my faith today, we're falling off the edge today. I'm just a man, not superhuman, I'm not superhuman, someone save me from the hate. It's just another war, just another family torn, we're falling from my faith today, just a step on the edge, just another day in the world we live. I need a